Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our readers and listeners of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine the show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Gordon S., Jackie A., and Nick W. On the show today, new guest is Taj Singh, President, CEO, and Director of Discovery Metals, a Canadian-based silver explorer and developer advancing the Cordero project in northern Mexico. Discovery Metals is part of the Oxygen Group. The company is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol DSV and also on the US OTC markets under the symbol DSVMF. Mr. Singh, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us, Andrew. Good to be here.
Well, Taj, your thoughts on the silver market here, looking back to 2016 and now with the initial COVID deleveraging, is silver the place to be?
You know, I really believe silver is the place to be right now. Precious metals in general, I really like the prospects for precious metals, but in particular for for silver as safe haven. As we've seen in many cycles before, there's actually a really good slide in our current deck that's available on our website. But you'll see in many cycles before, silver lags gold in a bull market, but when it goes, it really goes. And in almost every cycle I can think of, it significantly outperformed gold. So we love gold and silver, but we really think it's really the time for silver to shine.
And what is your position on the gold-silver ratio discussion? And does the historic ratio still hold a reasonable merit here?
Yeah, so historically, if you look over the past 50 years, I think we're talking about a 60-to-1 ratio, and we're sitting at over 100 now. I really do think it'll move back towards the historic ratio. You know, in the past couple decades, it kind of sat around 70, 80. And you have to think that even if gold stays put here, which I don't think it is, I think it's going. And it'll take silver along with it, but also the ratio should get fixed up here. So honestly, even if gold stays where it is and we get to 80-to-1, you're talking about a $24, $25 silver price. So it's all the signs are pointing to silver really shining here.
Take us back for a moment, Taj, and talk about your background and what attracted you to the natural resource sector.
I've been in it my whole career. I started metallurgical and mining engineering right out of high school. I've always been into it. I don't know. I've always just been into the sector and really took to it in university. And right out of my undergrad, I joined a job as an engineer, what we call an engineer in training, and they put you in a management program where you get to go work at all the various operations. And I worked for, at that time, one of the largest nickel producers in the world, Inco, who subsequently bought by Vale. But spent over 10 years there, got to go across the world at various operations and really dig in and see what was going on there. And my kind of love and interest and passion continued to grow for the sector. And then I got more and more involved in the corporate side of things. Then I went and became an analyst for 2 years at Macquarie because I had intimate knowledge of the sector, but also I was quite into finances and how the business situation of various companies. I was always into stocks. So it was kind of a great mix. I worked at Macquarie Capital Markets in Toronto covering junior gold and silver producers primarily, some developers as well. So kind of market cap of 100 to about 500 million. And you learn a lot being on that side of things. On the capital market side, it's fantastic. You really get to see how companies see their strategy through, how investors are thinking, things like that. And after that, I moved on to become VP Corporate Development and VP Engineering of Timmins Gold. I was there for close to 6 years. We had a 30,000 ounce per year producer in Sonora, Mexico. So that's where my intro to Mexico began. So now over 10 years, but we built that mine, put it into production, and it was a big operation, very big operation. And it's now currently It's still producing, and then after that, about 5.5, 6 years with Timmins, the Oxygen Group was starting a Mexican vehicle looking at early stage silver / polymetallic projects, and I joined them. And so the inception of Discovery was kind of late 2017. I came on there. It looked like a real interesting adventure to get in on, and had the experience in Mexico, knew the people, knew the networks, and how things get done in Mexico, and here we are.
Well, that's a good setup. And maybe speak just a little bit more to where you're at now, Taj. What brought you to Discovery Metals and the Oxygen Capital team? Can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, so basically it was kind of summer 2017 is when the ideas started. I think the due diligence for the assets that were in Mexico began earlier, and Oxygen's always had a reputation for delivering shareholder value and getting great projects with lots of data and focusing on the data, and sometimes looking at projects in an entirely different way to the previous operators. Discovery started with earlier stage projects that all had historical production, but they had never been drilled before. And so we continued to work on those. But at the same time, we had a very good access to capital markets, strong board and management. We had good access to capital markets and had a decent cash balance. There was a time when silver was, $12, $13, and there was a lot of assets out there that looked very interesting, but the companies were struggling to keep going. And one asset that came across the desk was the asset called Cordero, owned by Lavon Resources, which at one time had a 400 million market cap. They had spent about $50 million on the property, and in its time, in its heyday, kind of 2011, 2012, it was a fantastic discovery, but it was being kind of scoped by Lavon as a huge Penasquito style project, big project in it, massive leverage to silver, and silver was doing quite well at that time. And then afterward, it was quite a bit of a lull for silver for many years. But we looked at it and we said, is there a project there? We're not going to wait for silver to get to 25. Silver sitting here at 14, 15. Is there a project there that works at a reasonable kind of silver price? Because within this 1.5 billion ounces of silver equivalent, one of the world's largest silver resources, is there a project there that can work at 17 or 18? That is a very good size project, good grade, good margin, but then you've also got all the optionality if and when silver takes a run. And so we found that, yes, there was a project there that worked at 17 or 18 from spending quite a bit of time on it. And then here we are. So since then, silver's moved very strongly. We've been able to attract some very key investors. We've got a very healthy cash balance. We've been drilling, and just things look, really well set up for success.
And Taj, talk about just for a moment, Mark, the team at Oxygen, the group, the sister companies, the management teams of the sister companies, the technical expertise across the group, pretty much set up like it's all in-house. I mean, you have everything available. It's all in-house. And I suspect with the different folks on the Discovery board and management team that you guys really just are able to do everything in-house and really draw from each individual's expertise. Just speak to that and how's working with Mark O'Day.
Well, basically the Oxygen Group it's had serial success. Sold 6 companies or so in the past decade, crystallized huge amounts of value for shareholders. And that's the reason their ability to be able to go raise capital is because of the success they delivered, the shareholder value they've returned. And people will keep coming back in because they know that assets they pick, companies that they back, they're going to move. And it's honestly, there's a few well-known groups out there, but Oxygen is, I just joined them in 2017 with Discovery, but they've had an amazing reputation way before that, and they've continued to have fantastic performance. Liberty, Pure Gold, Discovery, Sun Metals. There's the 4 active companies. It truly is fantastic access to capital markets, laser focused on data, just a very strong kind of in-house backing in terms of technical credibility. It's been fantastic. And working with Mark, Mark is one of the most successful people in the industry, period. And it's been amazing to work with him daily and really learn so much from him because he's done it before. And it's been honestly a huge part of the success of Discovery is the Oxygen Group backing.
Well, let's get into discovery. First, give us a quick overview, and then also I want you just to include the capital structure, the cash on hand, and the key shareholders.
Discovery is our near-term focus is going to be on our Cordero asset, our flagship asset. And again, as I mentioned, we think we can drastically improve the economics of Cordero by optimizing for the current metals price environment through drilling and resource modeling and engineering. Within the over billion-ton open pit project, we believe there's a substantial high-grade core which can form the basis of a high-margin project at current silver prices. And that high-grade project could be standalone now, or it could be a starter to an expanded, much larger project that offers excellent leverage to silver price. And Discovery, the two things, if you want to remember about Discovery, are leverage to silver, period. There's no other name out there. I mean, first of all, the silver universe has maybe 10 to 15 names in it. It's already limited as it is in terms of producers and developers. But the leverage from going from 17 to 20 and then 20 to 25, there's no one that's got it, mainly because of the sheer size of our system. But also, so leverage is one thing and opportunity is the other thing. We've funded now. We can aggressively advance this project and really show it for what it is, the world-class asset we believe it is. In terms of capital structure, we just carried out a financing last week, but prior to that, we had 210 million shares outstanding. We had a cash balance of about $24 million to start the year. Market cap was kind of hovering around $100 million. Key shareholders, Eric Sprott, who came in last year, who's been a very fantastic and supportive shareholder, owns about 21% prior to this last raise, but after this raise will go up to about 24%. And our cash balance after this raise will be roughly over $40 million, $42, $43 million. So we're very well backed to aggressively advance Cordero and keep pushing ahead.
And speak to that for just a moment. That kind of cash balance for this kind of company, where do you see that cash balance will carry you guys on this project? I mean, is this sufficient funding to get you guys through, the next 18 months? What's it look like there?
Basically, we had about $20 million before this raise. So, you might say, why did you even need to do it? And it's the fact that large shareholders who were very supportive wanted us to get more aggressive with advancing the project. And with silver prices, only a few weeks ago at 12, 13, we thought it's a good idea to be prudent and to be in a position to have big programs for at least 2 years. So we're covered for more than 2 years. And to be honest, with this kind of cash balance, Discovery is really essentially covered to construction, to be honest. We plan to put out a brand new resource in PEA next year, and then move on to a PFS or FS the year after. We're now covered. By covered, we can really drill and drill and drill. This property is 35,000 hectares. The resource area takes up less than 1,000, so very little of it has been really explored. And there's already significant prospectivity of brand new targets on the property that have really not been explored at all. So honestly, if we've got Cordero, 1.5 billion ounces of silver equivalent, maybe there's another one. There's a satellite deposit. There's a bunch of work that can be done that now we are funded to do. And the fact that there is 1.5 billion ounces sitting right there in the center of the property gives you kind of high probability or high feeling that there might be something else out there nearby. With a system that big, there's got to be something else nearby. So in addition to be able to advance our main project, we think the regional and kind of new discovery potential is very, very significant as well.
How about let's talk price levels for a moment. Management and insiders, can you just kind of talk about the prior rounds of financing, and can you speak to the approximate levels that management and insiders own their shares?
So we did our original financing when the company started at 50 cents. As we went on, it was a tough time. When we started the company, there was some zinc price was probably $1.50 even. It was a really good time for zinc. So we were able to raise it a little bit higher price, but zinc came down, silver came down. We came at about the 30-cent level. As we kept pushing away, we maintained a good cash balance, and that's how we were able to then go acquire Lavon and Cordero. So we did the next financing. So the first one we did was 50 cents. Then we did a financing last summer, right when we acquired Lavon, a $9 million raise where essentially it was almost entirely all to Mr. Eric Sprott. That was at 23 cents. And then subsequent to that, once we closed the deal and started drilling, we actually went to Europe to kind of just do a roadshow, and there was significant support and interest from shareholders in Europe, and we were able to raise then another $19 million at 45 cents. So we kept pushing through. Share price was doing well. Every 3-4 weeks, we'd be putting out some very, very stellar drill results. And our thesis that there was this high grade core that was sizable, that had very good margin, was coming to light. And silver price was hanging in pretty well. We were funded essentially at that point for at least 18 months or so. And then obviously COVID came, silver price dropped, our share price dropped down into like the high 20s for a few days, low 30s, but then kind of came back to 40 and stayed well. And then obviously silver started moving pretty nicely. And we were able to do this last raise at 55 cents. And that's just for $25 million. It really was essentially a rights offering to our very large supportive institutional shareholders in North America and Europe. And again, it's load up the treasury and go get aggressive. New discoveries, show what this project really has, because it is a world-class asset.
Well, I'd wish the share price had stayed a little bit lower in the high 20s for a little bit longer, Taj, but it responded quite quickly again. So good for you, and good job on the capital raise, back up at at or near the highs in that area. So that's great. Speak to the key people on the management team, Taj. Who are you working with?
Yeah, so in addition to myself, we have our CFO, Andreas Labe. Andreas was at Tahoe previous to this. He also worked at Goldcorp. He's got about 16, 17 years of experience in the mining sector, fluent in Spanish, lived actually in Peru when he worked with Tahoe. He's fantastic, not only just dealing with the corporate governance, administrative, and financial functions, but very, very much an operations-oriented kind of guy. Worked at a bunch of sites over his career, and we also worked together at Timmins Gold for a few years, so we know how to work together. Our VP Exploration is Gernot Wober, who comes from Cisco. He was there for 6-7 years, and Aubin, Breval, and Cisco Mining, and was very active there as their VPX, and was an important part of the reason the Windfall asset is now sitting in the Cisco Mining and the initial work on that and the discovery of the new zones. So he's very active there, but he's also worked in Nevada with Great Basin Gold, also in South Africa with Great Basin Gold. He was one of the lead technical people at the Pebble project too, so he's had significant experience there. So he's got 35 plus years of experience on the ground in exploration work. And then our VP Corporate Development is Forbes Gemmell. He joined the team in January, and Forbes came to us from Guyana Goldfields, where he was VP Corporate Development. And he was very active at Guyana in terms of improving the project there. And he was on site quite a bit, very actively involved in the technical work and the improvements they made there. And prior to that, he ran a company in Brazil as CEO that was sold to an Australian company, a gold exploration company. That was for a few years. And prior to that, he was an analyst at Raging. So very strong and varied background. And prior to that, he worked on the buy side in his early years. Prior to being an analyst at Raymond James, he was on the buy side. So again, almost all of his career in the resource sector. So those are 4 key guys in the management team that pushed through. We also have our country manager who worked with me at Timmins Gold for 6 years. He was kind of chief geologist / general manager at the San Francisco gold mine. His name's Roman Solis, and he's in country, lives in Hermosillo, Sonora, and he's been his networks and ability to get things done, and also his a very strong geologist as well on top of all that. Has been amazing. So very lean team, but very experienced and able to get stuff done in Mexico.
Well, let's talk about the cornerstone asset, Cordero. Can you just take us back for the audience who may be not familiar with the project? Can you talk about the history of the project, including the prior owner, and what has held this project back, and why will Discovery Metals be the group to advance this to eventually become a mine?
Mining has been happening at Cordero for decades. A very small kind of artisanal mining on the greater Cordero property package that we now have. But the Cordero main discovery happened by Lavon Resources, 2009 roughly. I think their first hit was something like 150 meters of 150 gram per ton silver equivalent. That was their main discovery. It was the 5th hole in what we now know as the resource area. After that, almost every hole they were hitting was a very strong hole. They were able to raise money. They were able to spend close to, like I said, $45-50 million over, say, the next 3-4 years. And they really were scoping this project again for a Penasquito style project. At that time, that was, what they were looking for. And it had the size and the system was strong enough to make that a reality. And so they scoped it. They put a PEA out in their first one was 2013. It had a great NPV, decent IRR. It was high capex again because it's a big project, but you're talking about an NPV of close to $700 million, IRR, and this is all at $20 silver, IRR of about a little under 20%. And again, they had a 400 million market cap, and like I mentioned, we were just sitting here at 100. They kept working on it, and obviously silver kind of fell out of bed a bit. So, but their scope and their plan for Cordero was it's a big, huge system, Penasquito style, and that's what it is. And we'll kind of just shelf it until silver comes back. And of course, silver stayed low for several years here. So basically, Levon, it got to kind of early 2019. Levon had not done much work on the property for a couple of years. In the years preceding, they had done some drilling, upgrading the resource area. All the work was focused on the resource area. Again, as I mentioned, there was work done regionally to the main area that looked very interesting, but really the focus was the resource area. And they wanted to maintain some value. They didn't have a lot of extra money to do brand new drilling on new discoveries. So they focused on that, shelved the project somewhat, and then early 2019, we'd started looking at the project. We looked at a variety of projects, and this one looked extremely interesting. Marco D knew the Levon team quite well. He actually was an early investor in the discovery days of Cordero. In 2009, when Mark was running Frontier, they actually invested into Levon. So he knew them from a while ago, and we began a discussion on putting the two companies together. We did our work and our due diligence, and they saw what the auction group could bring to this. They also saw our early stage properties, which they liked very, very much. And it made sense, a good fit to put these two together. And we had the capital and the ability to go get more capital to keep exploring Cordero. But our main thesis was we're not going to wait for silver to get to 22. We want to make it work at 17 or 18. So is there a project there that works? And again, as I mentioned, there's a core that we really found in our due diligence that would work, that would have higher margin, that would have a good mine life. It could be its own project on its own. And the rest would be kind of just upside and gravy. And that's exactly what we said was going to be there. And as soon as we started drilling in September 2019, the deal closed in August 2019, but we started drilling in September. And ever since that, every few weeks when we're putting out results, you can see that the thesis is coming intact, is that there's a high grade core that's a lot bigger than was originally thought. And this project was actually a high grade project. It got painted with a brush of being a low grade big tonnage project, which it can be, but there's also a very sizable high grade core. So that's what we've been focusing on.
Can you just speak to how much you guys paid for the Cordero, just for the audience who may not know?
We paid, at the time the deal was announced, it was equivalent to about $10 million of Discovery shares. By the time the deal closed, it was almost double that. The share prices of both companies reacted quite well. Silver was moving up, and then a lot of people started seeing, oh, this thing looks like it actually might have some legs. So it moved up pretty considerably prior to the deal closing, but after announcement. So.
Yeah, and still fairly inexpensive. I think the MD&A had it at around 26 million, if I have my stuff right, but it's pretty dang cheap.
Exactly, yeah. So when we announced it was say 10 to 12 million, and then by the time we closed, it was about double that, exactly right, 25, 26 million dollars. So still, considering it was 50 or 60 million dollars spent on that property, we thought it was cheap, and we knew what it could be. I think it's all coming to fruition now.
And Taj, tell us about the Levon PEA, which I believe was done in 2018. How is this project scope and size now being optimized to improve the economics? And will management be confident enough after this new PEA that you're working on to move straight to feasibility?
So the Levon PEA, they were putting out one almost every year and a half as they updated and kept drilling. Another very important thing Levon did is they had a hectarage, which was historically mined by artisanals, but they were not letting go of it, meaning Levon, it was an important part. It was really right near the core of the resource area in late 2016. Finally, they were able to strike a deal, but it took 2-3 years, and they paid quite a bit of money in terms of dollars per hectare. It was a small piece of land, but they paid $2-3 million for it cash. But it completely made the land package just perfected it. And, the Lavon story at that time was not getting much credit, but it was a fantastic move by management at that time to do that. So anyways, they were putting out PEAs. The last PEA in 2018 they put out, again, as I mentioned, contemplated a huge resource. We're talking over 1 billion tons. What went to the economic part of that is they took out about 420 million tons out of that billion. The average grade was kind of about 45, 50 gram per ton silver equivalent. So relatively low, very low strip ratio, less than 1-to-1, so almost like 0.9. And it was a decent project, as I mentioned. It was at $20 silver. You're talking about a $700 million NPV. CapEx was over $500 million, which is a big bite to chew. And, it was a decent project. It's got many favorable characteristics, Cordero. Metallurgy is fantastic. They did quite a bit of met work. We will continue to do more, but metallurgy was fantastic. Infrastructure was amazing, right off a major highway. Power's there, water's there. It ticked all the boxes there. Very good social situation. The fact it's in Chihuahua. Chihuahua is a very mining centric state. All of the things were there, but the high capex and the lower IRR and the fact that it kind of needed at least a $20 silver price was kind of okay. People forgot about it. So again, as we went in, our thought is, is there high grade core there, and can you stage it? So you're looking at now a project where, for example, instead of, I should have mentioned the PEA contemplate a 40,000 ton per day. We're now thinking maybe you start at 10,000 ton per day. So your capex is sub 200 million, 150 million. But just that project alone, we're really striving for that NPV to be substantially more than the capex alone, just for that standalone part. Then, as capex is paid back, and or if silver price runs, you can start expanding the project because capex has now been paid. The project can get much larger, so you can go from 10 to 20,000 ton per day. Now you're pushing out close to 20 million ounces of silver equivalent a year. It's one of the largest silver projects out there. That way you've staged capex. It's a cash management kind of thing. It helps improve your NPV to capex ratio, your IRR. You've got a real project now that can be built. And because of the favorable geometry of the deposit, it's fantastic. There's a high grade starter at surface. You would have started there anyway, and then the rest of it is not sterilized at all. You just keep pushing back the pit, and you get into more and more ore and more and more ore. It's very favorable for a staged kind of approach.
Just talk a little bit more about that. With 10,000 tons per day, does the production profile at that figure, does it line up okay with the economics? Are you guys comfortable looking at that level of project given the high grades that you're focused on? And speak to, with the updated PEA that you guys are working on, can you speak to where you guys are targeting to see your all-in costs come in, including the lead, zinc, and gold credits?
Okay, so basically the economics of the project we're now contemplating, they stack up very well. And that the big part of it is Lavon used a 15 gram per ton silver equivalent cutoff. We're looking at a 50 gram per ton cutoff. At a 50 gram per ton cutoff, you're looking at roughly, including indicated and inferred, you're a couple 100 million tons of about 100 gram per ton silver equivalent, maybe a little more. That's what we're really focusing on. The rest of the metal that's outside of that, so we can get to it if silver goes. And if silver gets to 25, 30, this thing becomes bigger. But there's really, again, a very nice way to start this project, and it's still sizable and meaningful in that 50 gram per ton cutoff case. So we're going to be focusing our efforts on that. And this thing at 10,000 ton per day in the grades we're contemplating, say 100, 110 gram per ton, strip ratio is decent. We're going to continue to work on it. We think we can actually even maybe bring it down with the drilling we're doing, because there's quite a bit of spacing as you go northeast. The drill density cuts down a lot, and we're noticing when we're drilling, boom, we're hitting ore that was previously identified as waste. So your strip comes down and your grade's actually coming up. So that's what we're going to focus on, kind of 100 gram per ton, a little bit more than 100 gram per ton, open pit. What the tonnage in the mine life looks like, we'll see. That's all going to come to light as we continue our phase 1 drill program. But that 10,000 ton per day, you're talking about 8 to 10 million ounces silver equivalent a year. That stacks up with most major silver producers' top mines. Kind of all-in sustaining you talked about. If you look at cash cost kind of by silver equivalent, you're talking about what we're seeing in the early days and what Lavon showed is about $10, $11. We think we can improve upon that. There's still a lot of work to be done, drilling, resource modeling, mine planning, even process engineering. We think there's a lot of ways we can save some money, material amounts of money with significant changes to the flow sheet. So that's kind of the direction we're headed in. But long story short, our key numbers are NPV to CapEx ratio greater than 1-to-1, IRR mid to high 20s. Those are the things we're going to really focus on. And the fact that this has to be manageable from a CapEx point of view. You can't have a big ticket CapEx right up front. So those are our key focus points.
Okay, on the CapEx, can you just speak to, well, first, the all-in costs somewhere around today's silver prices?
Yeah, for silver equivalent cash costs, we're internally targeting about $10 or lower, silver equivalent cash costs. And for all-in sustaining costs per silver equivalent ounce, we're targeting somewhere around the $11, $12 range. So even the all-in sustaining cost is materially lower than today's silver price.
Okay, and the CapEx sub 200 million, and what's the internal rate of return you guys are targeting?
We'd like to get into the 20s for sure at current silver price. I think for people to take real notice of something, you'd have to get into the 20s there.
Well, let's talk about covered the CapEx here. So let's talk timeline for advancing. How long to finalize studies? Talk about the permitting process, how long that would take, and talk about the construction process under this new optimized smaller footprint. Can you just kind of cover us timeline? How many years are we talking here?
So it's a ways off still, and we still have to determine if you can go right from a PEA to an FS. I mean, we're going to strive for making our PEA to a PFS quality. That's important to us. We're very technically oriented, and the quality and kind of confidence, the data and robustness of the PEA, we want to be very strong and defendable. So basically, the kind of key milestones here are putting out a resource by, say, this time next year, or maybe even a little earlier. Now we can accelerate things. Brand new resource. Again, as I mentioned, this project is completely going to be a new project compared to what it was before. We're doing substantial amount of drilling. Brand new resource kind of this time next year. Subsequent to that, 2 to 3 months after PEA, and then move forward and planning our next drilling for the PFS and onwards. And again, we'll make the decision at that time whether we go right to an FS or go with a PFS prior to the FS. Say the next study is done the year after that, and that would take, say, about a year. So you're talking about at least 2.5 years before a construction decision. Maybe it can be accelerated now with the higher balance we have, but the permitting situation also in Mexico is very clear and transparent. It's one of the top countries in kind of North America, Latin America for getting stuff done in terms of permitting. It's about a year. So once at the PEA, we kind of know what the footprint of this thing will look like, what are the throughputs, things like that. We'll start advancing that. It takes about a year or so to get construction permits. We've got time, and we'll get that all set up well in advance.
And so we're talking with construction maybe 2024.
Maybe a little earlier than that, but yeah, if you're being conservative with timelines, yeah. And then again, with the cash balance and depending how things go, things can be accelerated. We now have the ability to accelerate things.
Tell us a little bit more about Chihuahua State, Mexico, that particular jurisdiction compared to the others. How comfortable are you guys with this state versus some of the other states you've operated in?
Chihuahua is probably one of the top mining states in terms of government's views on mining, ability to get stuff done, ability to source skilled labor. It's a mining state. The major gold silver belt of Mexico runs right through Chihuahua. Fantastic in terms of infrastructure, logistics specific to Cordero. It's not out in some very wet areas or in some mountainous areas, which other projects I've dealt with have been. It's perfect for an open pit. And government's very mining centric, the state government. Other states that we do like is obviously most of the north and the northwest we like Sonora, Durango. Those are all great states. There's a few states as you get into the south that get a little bit more cautious about. But the pretty well-known mining states of Sonora, Chihuahua, Durango, Zacatecas, those are states we do like.
And talk about the local community just around the project. The infrastructure's there very close by. How's the local community support for the project and everything good on that front?
So there's two things. One is there's not a lot of people around. Despite it being off a major highway, it's actually quite remote, which is good. in that it doesn't really affect many people. But the people who do live in the towns nearby are extremely supportive of mining in general, but very supportive of Cordero. In its heyday, like I said, the previous operators created a fantastic culture in terms of people being just really engaged and into the project and making sure it's an important thing socially to make everyone, get everyone on the same page. And we're lucky we inherited a great relationship that Lavon built with the people nearby. And again, mining in Mexico, right, the largest silver producing country in the world, mining's in their blood. They love mining. Kids grow up thinking they're going to be in mining, and it's part of the culture. And it's great to deal with kind of communities and a situation like that. We're in a very favorable position with that.
Tell us a little bit more about the other projects that Discovery has. Can you just kind of overview those for us?
Yeah, I will. So that's in the state nearby to us called Coahuila. Again, another state. I missed it when I talked about it. A state it's in the north, just below Texas, the state. And we like working there as well. But we've got 3 key other properties there, a multitude of other earlier stage ones, but 3 key ones that are kind of ready for drilling, if you will, technically. The Puerto Rico project, the Minerva project, and the Monclova project, all in Coahuila. And they've all had past production on them by artisanals, very, very high grade direct shipping ore, silver, zinc, lead, sometimes some gold, sometimes some copper, but primarily silver, zinc, lead. The key one of those that kind of was at the beginning of Discovery, the flagship beginning project of Discovery, was Puerto Rico. And that has produced anecdotally over 1 million tons of average grade of 40% zinc, about 300-400 silver, very, very high grade direct shipping ore that was mined by artisanals, pick and axe, and then shipped down right to the smelters. And all of these properties I mentioned, including the one in Puerto Rico, have never been drilled. These guys were just mining visually, if you will, because it's so rich, the level of mineralization. And so we've got Minerva and Monclova ready to drill permitted. We've got kind of a 1,500 meter program for each of them kind of planned. We've just been really busy with Cordero and working on that, but we will be looking into when we're going to be drilling Minerva, Monclova. Puerto Rico is in the final stage of its permitting process. It sits on the buffer zone of a nature reserve, so not within it, it's in the buffer zone. And because of that, the permitting process, even to drill, is extended. It takes, year, 18 months. And obviously with the new government coming in, and obviously now COVID slowed down, there's been delays for everything, not just permitting, but everything. That's a governmental process and across all sectors. So we're in the final stages there. We hope to get that permitted and then get going on that. And that's a CRD deposit, a carbon replacement deposit. All of these ones are very, very high grade, low tonnage. So a little bit different than Cordero, but similar mineralization and not too far from it. It's just in the neighboring state.
Okay. Talk a little bit more about what your guys' plans are for these other non-core assets. We've seen Liberty monetize non-core assets as they focus in on really 2 main assets, Black Pine and Goldstrike. Speak to what you guys are going to do here. Is the plan to advance these a little bit, maybe have some discovery action? Is there a goal to monetize these and then focus on Cordero? What's the plan?
The focus really is Cordero. When Puerto Rico does get permitted, it's a big project. It could be its own project on its own for a company, which is what it originally was intended to be. It has huge potential in terms of grade, but even the size of the system, I didn't talk about that, but it's a 11, 12 kilometer strike that's just never really been explored. Maybe 500 meters out of the 11, 12 kilometer fold thrust corridor has been explored. So super, super prospectivity on Puerto Rico in terms of size. I think, we haven't thought about it yet. It hasn't been permitted. We'll get to it when we think about it. But these 3 projects, they could be drilled by us, and then our focus will be Cordero, though. So if there's something interesting where it looks like someone else can advance it, we stay exposed to the projects, we could consider something like that. And alternatively, we're looking at, we could just drill it. We could do a first stage drill test of the properties and see where we go from there. So we're kind of in the middle of thinking about things. The fact that it's close, the fact that we could use the same teams, the fact that they're not really costing us any, the claims taxes for these are inconsequential. that all helps. But I think we'll be making a decision pretty soon over the next few months on how to proceed.
Okay, and you guys do, these drill programs are planned to go ahead this year, except for the one that's waiting for permits?
Yeah, the drill programs are planned. When we're going to do them, we're not certain yet, but they are ready. We've already went out and gotten quotes from various drill contractors. We know exactly where the holes are going. It's just a matter of, okay, let's do them now. Now that we've got the treasury loaded up a bit, it might make sense to get going. The focus really is Cordero. That's the lowest hanging fruit, most effective use of exploration dollars.
Yes, absolutely agreed. And Taj, what is the preferred outcome for discovery? So talking, in-game strategy, exit strategy, takeover or production scenario?
I think you have to be kind of open to them all. As you'll see, even within the oxygen group, a lot of times they've sold it prior to production. And in the case with True Gold and now with Pure Gold, you can take it to production. We have all the expertise in-house, obviously, to do either. We've got resource developers, project optimizers, and then mine builders. We've got it all kind of in-house. Probably it makes sense for anyone who knows the sector that the way to crystallize value probably the quickest and most effectively and efficiently is to sell prior to production. Show the project for what it's worth, really build up a good case, an economic case on it. And we truly believe Cordero is something, it will be a mine. We truly believe that for a mid-tier or major producer at some point. Now, if we got to the position where we had to build it, could we build it? Could we raise the money and build it? Yes. The answer is yes. I really think, especially if silver takes a run, it's going to be a target.
Absolutely. I think it's a good position that you guys are in. And when we look out at the world of silver developers and explorers, why should investors pay attention to a developer over, say, a mid-tier or larger silver producer?
In various people's portfolios, I think you should have a bit of everything. But it's been shown whenever there's a bull market, and especially in the situation we're in, when there's not many assets out there, big development stage assets, the developers outperform in a bull market, the producers. The producers immediately outperform because obviously the earnings improve, the free cash flow, things like that. But developers and the fact that you have this a takeout kind of premium in there, that they do outperform in kind of these market situations. What's specific to Cordero is simply the fact of there's not many projects like Cordero. It's got huge size, unparalleled optionality and leverage. There's just not many out there like it, especially in the silver space, but even metals in general, there's not many like it, but especially in the silver space, there's not many like it.
And how are you taking advantage, Taj, personally? How are you taking advantage of silver? And is Discovery your only silver equity holding?
Yeah, I'm definitely management insiders and board before this last financing own close to 15%. We've all got skin in the game. We all were in on the original financing and even subsequent financings, but we're all in at levels around here. We're very bullish on Discovery, very bullish on silver and gold. I'm personally, my life's pretty exposed to mining as it is. So I've got a little bit of my personal money that I put into various equities, but the vast majority of it is in Discovery.
And is there any other, for investors, any points or tips for what you might do or things that work for you as far as how to approach silver equity investing? Is there any other companies that you like or anything that investors should pay attention to, or maybe another management team they should pay attention to?
There's some interesting names out there. There's a lot of good names, but really the way I kind of think of things is you need the two M's I call them, but margin and mine life. If an asset has those two things, and then on top of that is another M, the management has the management team done it before? And because if they've done it before, especially multiple times, they're probably going to do it again. So if the asset's got margin and mine life, and it's got a good management team, you're going to be fine. That's generally what I found.
Okay, well, we'll call it 3M.
Let's go 3M then.
Well, for potential investors who are on the sidelines listening, considering silver and considering Discovery as a potential primary vehicle, what would you say to them at this stage and at current Discovery price levels? Why should they consider Discovery Metals, Taj?
Basically, Andrew, I think I've said it before, but there's no other name that's got the leverage we've got. So if you believe silver is going to 20, there's no other name that's gonna torque as strong as Discovery can. And the fact that it's got a management team again that's done it before, that has significant experience in the sector and significant experience in country. There's no really other asset that's got the leverage we've got, and now being so well funded and backed by strong institutional investors, we're really in a perfect position to capitalize from this bull market. If you think silver's going to 10 or 11, then silver's probably not for you. But if you really think that there's a case for silver getting even to 20, there's not really any names that have the torque that we have, period, and our ability to get things done. We've shown since we've gotten our acquisition of Lavon done, everything we've said we've done, and we think we're going to continue to do that. It's a very simple, clean story, to be honest. It's one key asset that we have to execute on. If we execute on it, boom, you're going to have a project that's going to work, that's going to be in demand. A lot of people are going to look at. With the backdrop of a rising silver price, all the better.
Yes, and I'm trying to find a comparison. I'm thinking right here, trying to see if I can come up with a comparison, and there's nothing coming to mind, and just because there probably isn't a lot of options. So certainly a very compelling situation, and if silver goes to $10, I think that is a fantastic opportunity to accumulate. So I guess I'm not necessarily opposed to seeing a lower silver price for a time. But
actually, that's a fantastic point. We're cashed up now, so we're not really worried about day-to-day share price. And if silver did dip, it'd be a fantastic opportunity to go acquire, even for us in terms of acquiring potentially assets, but for investors to go acquire good stocks.
Yes, absolutely. And the best way for investors to reach out to the company?
It'll be the best is through email at info@dsvmetals.com. That's available on our website, which is dsvmetals.com. So our ticker, metals.com, and then you go to the contact page and you'll see all the information there. We pride ourselves on being regularly in touch with all of our investors, regardless of size.
Taj, thanks for taking the time to introduce us to Discovery Metals. Good luck on advancing the Cordero project, and we're looking forward to watching progress.
Fantastic. Thank you for your time. Thanks so much.